Namaste, everybody. Welcome to thefoundationmethod.com. I'm Cam, the host of the program, with another little episode on mental health, mental hygiene. And today we're going to talk about the Serenity Prayer, a simple plan for living. So, have you suffered from unmanageable life circumstances or complex thinking, or do you make life a little bit more complicated than you should, or is life a bit more complicated for you than you feel that you can handle? And do you go through overwhelm, or are you over medicating, or are you just confused basically about how to view things? And this little prayer really helped me, because I've been through those things in my life, and I found this prayer was a wonderful solution to it. It really just simplified things nicely for me. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about what it is, a bit of the history, the application of how to use it or how to view it so that it's very easy to use, and then my experience as well, so to give you some of my real life examples of how I used it and how it changed and affected my life. So what it is, you've probably heard this before on a TV show somewhere, maybe in a yoga room or a recovery room, or a friend might have said it, or a parent uttered it under their breath when the dog did something on the carpet. But very simply, the prayer goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So very simple prayer, and I'll talk more to explaining that in a minute. But let's talk about the history, so where it came from. So the Serenity Prayer is a prayer that became common knowledge through its use by the Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step programs, as well as in popular media. My name is Earl comes to mind. Today, the prayer is utilized as a catch-all saying, but is heavily used in 12-step and other recovery groups to incentivize personal responsibility and calm in the face of adversity. And I think that's something that we're all going through a little bit on our own different levels at the moment. So that's why I decided to actually go into this theme recently, because I see a lot of people struggling with unmanageable emotions, and the complexity of the problems that we're currently facing on a global level. So the modern version of this prayer is attributed to the American theologist Reinhold Niebuhr, but it's possibly based on a series of sayings that date back to ancient time. So most people are familiar with the common form of the prayer, which reads, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. While most popular version of the prayer is a truncation of Niebuhr's original transcript. So the origin of the prayer, earliest written reference to the Serenity Prayer dates back to 1932 in a diary entry by Winifred Crane Weigel. So Weigel was a pupil of Niebuhr and quoted the prayer in his own personal diary, attributing it to the theologist. Weigel was then responsible for several versions of the prayer, which appeared in newspapers, as well as a prayer book which was published in 1940 referencing the prayer. So these references are often the simplest and the closest to the current original version. So it's believed that Niebuhr first wrote the Serenity Prayer as part of a sermon, which then he used at the Heath Evangelical Union Church in Massachusetts. He continued to use it in sermons from 1934, where it spread to Alcoholics Anonymous and was quickly adopted by the group. In 1951, Niebuhr published the printed version of the Serenity Prayer, including the first written mention of the word grace in the poem. So this is the full version. God, grant me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from the other, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting the hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. So yeah, you can tell it's pretty heavy on the Christian, pretty evangelical as well there. So my apologies to the atheists in the room, or the people that don't lean into this language. I'm just giving you the roots and the history of it. And again, you can remove the religious overtones there and extract the meanings as per your needs. So AA in the prayer. Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step groups have made use of Serenity Prayer since at least 1941. The original text of the Serenity Prayer distributed was follows. Father, give us courage to change what must be altered. Serenity to accept what cannot be helped, and the insight to know the one from the other. So again, a different text there. Previous versions. While the current Serenity Prayer was proven to have been written by Neba, there's a variety of much older prayers, sayings that reflect a similar meaning. So the oldest one dates to the 1st century to Epictetus, a Greek Stoic philosopher born as a slave. Epictetus was taught that philosophy was a way of life, and he lived according to his guidelines of accepting whatever happened while remaining responsible for what happens. His writings are filled with many similar quotes like this. Do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. So in the 8th century, a Buddhist monk, Shanditeva, wrote another similar line to the Serenity Prayer. So he wasn't a very well-liked monk in the ashram, and these words were in direct response, they believe, to his lack of public favour. If there's a remedy when trouble strikes, he says, what reason is there for dejection? And if there is no help for it, what use is there in being glum? So the application of this prayer, as you can see, it sort of dates back from lots of different sayings. Everything comes from somewhere. It's a wonderful piece of worldly wisdom, and it's got its roots in a few different cultures. But the application of it, very simply, and I reference the words of Yoda from Star Wars: either do or do not. There is no try. So when I'm triggered and I think that I can't, and I need to simplify and figure out what's mine. Is it my side of the street? If not, I let it go. So the idea, is there something that I can do about it? Is it my side of the street? If yes, take action, make a plan, and do the first next right thing, and so on, one day at a time. If it's not my side of the street, I've got to let it go. And if I'm confused if it's my side of the street or not, if I'm unsure what I can do to positively affect my resolution, am I too close to see? Is it that I can't see the forest for the trees? Then if yes is the answer to that, then I ask for help. I ask a mentor or a friend or a colleague who's got good perspective or insight, or an expert or someone who's gone through it before that has the result that you desire. So I see a common mistake with this step is that people will go and ask somebody that they trust about relationships, and this person's never had a successful relationship. Or, they go and ask their yoga teacher about their taxes, or they go and, ask, a spiritual advisor about politics. The idea, I guess what I'm pointing to is speak to somebody more directly who's gone through the issue that you're seeking to clarify, but that has the resolve that you're seeking for. So somebody who's actually living the wisdom that you're seeking to understand, because often their authentic understanding of what they had to go through to get there and the numerous failures that they might have had brings a lot more wisdom than somebody who ideologically can understand. That being said, maybe a professional, a psychologist, if you've got some sort of, baffling psychological issues, maybe just going to see somebody who's a trained expert in the areas that you're seeking to get resolved. If you've cut off your arm, you're not going to see a psychologist, you're going to see a doctor. So that's pretty much what I'm saying, right? So this person must not only have your best interests at heart, but be able to be truthful, even if it's an uncomfortable truth, unbiased, or if anything, leaning towards your highest good as a person. So when you're in recovery, when you're in the recovery rooms, part of the recovery process of a 12-step program is to go and get yourself a sponsor. And so choosing a sponsor, you go and approach the sponsor, they don't approach you. And the idea is that you look for the quality of recovery in that person, their understanding of the program, or just them as a person, their ethics, their attributes, their character, that you resonate with as a person. And then by doing that, you can be more easily honest with that person, and then that person can really be more receptive to the information that you're going to share. The other thing is that you want to trust that person and trust that they've got your highest good as part of their perspective. So that's why I love the peer-to-peer recovery, because it becomes a real deep friendship, and a very unique friendship that's different to your friends and your family or your partner. This person is a different sort of relationship, and that relationship is based on recovery for your highest good. And that's why it's such a powerful tool. And that's why also recovery will vary from practitioner to practitioner or person to person, based on the quality of the sponsor and what they've been through, and how deep they've dived into recovery beyond just the 12 steps. So that being said, once you gain the perspective, we're back to either do or do not. There is no try. So it's that idea of a simple plan for action. Simply keep my side of the street clean, and if the situation can't be resolved ideally, then I surrender the best that I can and just do the best I can for that day. But the main idea is that I keep my side of the street clean, even if I can't get the result that I really desire out of the situation. That's the best that you can do today, and then maybe you try again tomorrow. So my experience with this. So the first part, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I can't change. Actually, I first should say that I first came across this wisdom in the recovery rooms. I first came across it consciously, I should say, in the recovery rooms, because I do recall as a young man my grandmother mentioning it at some stage and saying those words. My grandmother loved a beer, and I'm wondering if perhaps she might have attended the odd recovery meeting, but I also know that she was a spiritual and a religious person, so it makes sense that she would have said it at some stage. But I first came across it in the recovery rooms, and I used to see it on the wall, and you say it at the beginning and the end of meetings, and it just kind of washes over you, and it just washes over you. And then suddenly it starts to sink in. And the simplicity of the prayer then starts to filter into your daily decision making. And as you do the process of the 12 steps, then your sponsor generally guides you through this AA wisdom, or this 12-step wisdom. And so the things where you need to take action to do something, or you're baffled, or you're trying to process your emotional perspective on what you're unpacking, this becomes really instrumental in getting a perspective on this, because some of this 12-step unpacking can be quite painful. And generally people that have started the journey of a 12-step program are probably presenting trauma. Their life's probably a bit of a mess. I describe it as, everything's in the back of the car. You put your foot on the brake and then everything slides into the seat in front of it, like onto your lap. And then you've got to kind of unpack it. So yeah, if that's happened to you, or if you feel like life is unmanageable, this is a really important little simple prayer to get a hold of. So my experience. So I struggled a lot with this, especially with my shortcomings. As I started to unpack in steps 4 and 5, we look into what our character defects are, what our shortcomings are that cause us suffering, cause other people suffering. So one of my main character defects was people pleasing, which was trying to make someone treat me in a certain way with my behavior. And so when they didn't respond to me in the way that I felt was what I wanted, based on my people-pleasing behaviors and words and actions, then I get unmanageably resentful. So when I accepted the truth that someone else's thoughts on me are their own business, and that it's really not none of mine. It allowed me to let go, and it was a huge relief and a breakthrough, creating peace in my life, one less unnecessary problem to medicate. So the big word here is acceptance. So this first part, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I can't change. So a beautiful little verse from Stephen Cope on this really explains the point of acceptance in relevance to this prayer as well. He says, through practice, I've come to see that the deepest source of my misery is not wanting things to be the way that they are, not wanting myself to be the way that I am, not wanting the world to be the way that it is, or not wanting other people to be the way that they are. Whenever I'm suffering, I find this war with reality to be at the heart of my problem. So war with reality. That reminds me of how I was before recovery, wanting to have things the way I wanted them. And then through understanding this part of acceptance, it just gave way for so much more peace in my life, which I'm really thankful for these days. Because when I'm feeling peaceful, I make better decisions. I make less mess to clean up anyway. And I'm generally a happier and more content person. I can practice contentment a lot easier. So the next part of the prayer, courage to change the things I can. So this is the call to action part. So 12-step program needs a call to action. It's a program of action. And so when I got this, that this is primarily about my part in it, I began to see situations that I created suffering in my resentments, my behaviors, words, or action. So I realized that there was a common thread in all my sad stories that I was moping about, and that thread was me. So once I got to understand that, that if I'd changed my thoughts, my perspective, or my behavior in a certain situation, I would have had a different outcome. And so I wouldn't have ended up with a lot of the problems that I was, carrying on, moping, medicating, getting resentful for, poor me, self-pity, all that type of stuff. So this part also gave me the fire to move forward through fear, that it was the right thing to do rather than the easy thing to do, and allowed me through that acceptance part that I was learning to be okay to be a beginner at any stage in my life. And so I grew so much from this particular call to action, this idea of being courageous enough to do the right thing. And it allowed me to embrace a whole brand new career as a yoga teacher. It allowed me the courage to let go of the hospitality life and lifestyle that wasn't serving me anymore, and it was making me sick. I was very good at it, but unfortunately the doctor just gave me the marching orders there, and I just had to accept that. And then it also allowed me to be okay and enjoy being a student again, and learn a whole brand new bunch of things like video editing and doing what I'm doing right here. So that was amazing, especially at my age, because a lot of people that, get to that middle life kind of hang up their boots on learning new stuff. But I realized that it's really important for me. And I don't think I'll ever stop that process as well. Last part is the wisdom to know the difference. So this is the part that I struggled with a lot in early recovery, and the benefits of having older, wiser, sober member gave me so much perspective shift on my issues that I relearned how to trust myself. And through regular prayer and meditation, I became more connected to my understanding of a higher power or life, and then and how I tuned into the flow of life, the gifts of insight, clarity, and intuition began to manifest. So when I was trying to do life by my will, it sort of constricts life when I try and force it by my iron hand. But when I hand over to life, or the flow of life, it's the way I think of a higher power, and let that flow through me, things happen more synchronistically. There's less effort, more result. It's more joyous. I have a lot more trust. I have a lot more faith that things are going to work out, even when things are tough. And also, I'm okay to ask another person's perspective. So this step allowed me the humility to be okay with not knowing, and also to be okay to be wrong. So asking somebody who's got better perspective because I genuinely want to know the answer, rather than want them to affirm my perspective and my understanding. And for me, that really helped grow me as a person. So this part helps me see which side of the street the issue lies on primarily. Like, is it mine or is it somebody else's, another person, place, thing, something that I can't control as much as I desire that I wish I could. And this parcel also allows me to take wise action based on others' mistakes so that I don't have to make them, as well as advanced resolutions years beyond my understanding. So when I talk to somebody who's gone through this stuff before and they explain their journey with it and they give me all of their insight and their wisdom and all the series of mistakes, it just gives me so much more power to make a better decision. And so some people in recovery talk about their higher power being the group, the wisdom of the fellowship of the people in the program that have walked this path before them, that can help them navigate what's basically a brand new world with a whole brand new bunch of ideas and decisions to make. And so that becomes really powerful and really beautiful. And there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of faith that comes from that process. So the main thing here is I used to be a complex person with complex mind, and this was just a simple plan for living, thank God. So I hope you've enjoyed today's little episode there on Serenity Prayer, a simple plan for living. If you did, then jump on over to thefoundationmethod.com where I've got a free training there for you. Do the free training. Just put your email into the mailing list, and then you can do an hour's free training where I talk about the 6 biggest problems and 6 high quality solutions that I found on my wellness journey. That's going to fast track you years ahead of where you're at if you've just started this journey and you're standing at the bottom of self-awareness mountain yourself. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Remember, subscribe, share the video with your friends, and I'll see you at the next episode. Thanks for coming. Namaste.